Yes.
It's okay.
We can see it, okay, so go ahead like this, but it's...
Okay.
So first, so sorry, I will try to...
Andreas, you can just use the introduction because I look me up at Wikipedia, so you can have more of your coffee.
No, it's fine. Just a few words, however, because I'm introducing the speaker. So Professor Schwerdtfeger is a distinguished professor and director of the Theoretical Chemistry Physics Center and the head of New Zealand Institute of Advanced Studies. He has several degrees, chemist, mathematics, and so on. He did a part of his academic career in Germany. Then he moved to New Zealand. And he had a number of awards, the Hector Medal. He is the fellow of the International Academy of Quantum Molecular Science, James Cook Fellowship, Humboldt Research Prize, and so forth. So he published around 350 papers, and he's a well-known scientist in his field. So Peter, thank you very much for having accepted to talk to us. Unfortunately, you cannot be here today, but at least we have you on Zoom. So the floor is yours.
Okay, wonderful. So, unfortunately, I cannot be in Bordeaux, one of my favorite places, because I'm a great fan of the Bordeaux wine, and would love to be here. So what Schwerdtfeger just said, I will continue and show you that is exactly what we have here in New Zealand. You see this wonderful picture by Raphael, and by the way, there is one woman in there. Most of you probably know, that's Hypatia of Alexandria. So it's not all means blood in this wonderful fresco by Raphael. But there's a subtitle here, the old world of thinking scholars is slowly crumbling, and what I mean, it's slowly crumbling in New Zealand, and it's really not slowly crumbling, it's very fast at the moment. So let me just tell you that I'm a fundamental scientist. I work on fundamental issues in chemistry and physics beyond the standard model and all that sort of stuff. I really was not interested in any kind of politics, just science, because for me science is fun. But however, in July 31, 2021, everything changed because this letter came out. It's called the Listener letter. And the Listener is a journal pretty much like the Times in New Zealand. It was a letter signed by 7 academics. And just to let you know what happened here. There was a recent report from Government National Certificate of Educational Achievement Working Group on proposed changes to the school curriculum. It aimed to ensure parity for indigenous knowledge, which we call Mataranga Maori in New Zealand, with other bodies of knowledge credentialed by the NCEA. And the idea here is to have mana orite, again, Maori phrase for equal status. So Maori indigenous knowledge should have equal status with the sum of all other knowledge systems. It promotes discussion and analysis of the ways in which science has been used to support the dominance of Eurocentric views, among which its use as a rationale for colonization of Maori and the suppression of Maori knowledge, and the notion that science is a Western European invention and itself evidence of European dominance over Maori and other indigenous people. So in reaction to that, 7 professors from Auckland University wrote this In Defense of Science. And the statement, the major statement in there is that indigenous knowledge is critical for the preservation and perpetuation of culture and local practices and plays key roles in management and policy. However, in the discovery of the empirical universal truth, it falls far short of what we can define as science itself. And just because of this listener letter, before I go into the reaction, what happened after this letter was published, just a few 2 terms which you should know, which when you are in New Zealand and you talk about indigenous knowledge systems. So The two important ones are Tikanga Maori, is the Maori way, how to live and interact with other people and the environment. It is based on both experience and learning that has been handed down through generations. And more recently, strong proponents of Tikanga Maori see Western values such as the Enlightenment as colonization and indoctrination of the indigenous people in New Zealand. And as a result, there is currently a very strong decolonization movement within New Zealand, and I come back to this one. And Mataranga Maori, literally translated, means Maori knowledge. So it's all of the Maori knowledge system. It's a more recent term that broadly includes traditions, values, concepts, philosophies, worldviews, understandings, and of course, Te Reo Maori, which is the Maori language. It contains spiritual and mythological elements and takes a holistic view of science. Strong proponents of Mataranga Maori reject Western science as colonization and indoctrination of the indigenous people. And this has created a very strong anti-Western science culture in New Zealand schools and in universities. So the outflow from the listener letter, just this one page, immediately two scientists, Sean Hendy, Susie Wiles, one a physicist, the other one a biologist, called this scientific racism and organized a petition against the 7 professors who signed the listener letter with 2,000 signatories. The Royal Society published a statement against the listener letter and started a disciplinary procedure in order to evict 2 fellows of the Royal Society. The New Zealand Association of Scientists also condemned the listener letter, dismissing Mataranga Maori as pure racism and arrogance. Perhaps the strongest outfall from the listener letter and criticism comes from Tara McAllister, that was published in the Journal of Global Indigeneity, 50 Reasons Why There Are No Maori in Your Science Department. And number 1 is because of Kendall, Garth, Michael, Douglas, Robert, Elizabeth, and John. These are the 7 people. Elizabeth Rada is well known in philosophy. The 7 people who signed the listener letter. Because of racism, because your department is full of dusty dinosaurs, and it goes on and on and on. And there are 50 of those points. I only give you 7 here. The last, number 7 here is, just read that for you, because your department is an anxious, bullying, colonial, dangerous, ego-driven, I'm not saying the next word, gloomy, hurtful, isolating, juvenile, and it goes on. It's amazing what you can nowadays publish in journals and what goes through. This is really, to my opinion, hate speech. However, there were also strong supporters of the listener letter, amongst them Richard Dawkins from the UK, Jerry Coyne, and many others like Steven Pinker from the US. And there were news articles published in support of the listener and calling even the Royal Society is anti-science and academics don't stifle healthy debate and so on. And these are only a few things. You cannot imagine what the outfall was of that listener letter, at least 100 articles in favor and 100 articles again. Because of the criticism, now the new way is not completely replacing science with indigenous knowledge or indigenous science, but teach indigenous knowledge alongside science. And they still insist of mana or rite, this means 50% share in schools, and perhaps also a very large share at universities. This means that every subject like mathematics, physics, or chemistry taught in schools and in universities will have a strong component of Mataranga Maori. We just wrote a response, and I think it's almost in press, where we say that these 2 authors fail to consider how to resolve conflicts between science and indigenous knowledge in empirical content or methodology in the classroom. And the mana orite, which asks for equal status, the Mana-Uribe policy states that indigenous knowledge and science should be given equal status, but equating such vastly different systems is, to our opinion, meaningless and based on relativist and postmodernist concepts of social constructivism. It is also inherently, to our opinion, antithetical to science. Nevertheless, the previous government, a Labour Party, so more leaning on the left-wing side, pushed a curriculum change through the public schools. It's the refreshed New Zealand curriculum, trying to get Mana-Uribe for Mataranga Maori into schools. And the way they see Western science is perhaps best illustrated by this kind of diagram, which you can see by these proponents of Mataranga Maori. On the left hand, you have the indigenous knowledge system. On the right hand, you have the Western knowledge system, and you can clearly see the kind of negative tone you have on the right hand side for the Western knowledge system, Euro-Western culture-based, elitist, global, religion no longer linked, and on the other side, indigenous is holistic, multi-generational, communication important, all life has value, and. So this is in principle the kind of stuff the kids would get in New Zealand schools. And leaflets were already sent out to schools. We also produced a leaflet, a message to New Zealand teachers about science in the national curriculum, and clearly pointed out the difference between the indigenous knowledge system and the sciences, and said indigenous knowledge is best taught in areas like history or in social sciences, but please not in science. It should not be conflicted with science. Nevertheless, these people are pushing still ahead. We had a change in government. Now we have a more right-wing leaning government, but it's very difficult to wind the clock back at the moment. And you see this paper here, Epistemic Agency, Indigenous Knowledge, the School Curriculum. One of the authors is Rosemary Hipkins, the mother of Chris Hipkins, in our previous prime minister, just to let you know. She's inherently, to my opinion, postmodernistic and is pushing for equal status of Mataranga Maori. And even she says if science concepts are coming into the indigenous knowledge system, this is basically a recolonization of Mataranga Maori. Just to give you here one example of what happened, the concept of Mauri was introduced in the science class. And Mauri is the life force of all chemical reactions. And of course, we know since a very long time that we only have 4 fundamental forces in nature, and there is no life form in any chemical reaction, okay? But these are the kind of mythological aspects which are creeping into the sciences at the moment. I'd like to mention Professor Elisabeth Rader here. She was aware of that since a very long time, since over 20 years. I was not. I only became aware because of the listener letter. She published an enormous amount of criticism on biculturalism, treatyism, and postmodernism, and decolonization, the decolonization movement in New Zealand, just to let you know. So she says here, for example, one of the most serious consequences of such cultural relativism and of immediate relevance to universities occurs when objective scientific inquiry is regarded as just another cultural story. She's really great in defending the sciences. I was interviewed by the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, and I clearly pointed out to the journalist of what is going on in New Zealand and the problems we have, but he basically told me he has to be very careful, even in Germany, what he writes. He also interviewed Axel Gelfert, president of the German Society for the Philosophy of Science, who basically defended what is going on in New Zealand. And I read that for you, so you see how he is thinking. Modern science is a global undertaking that must also be open to those who have had difficulty accessing it. Well, we can agree with that. It is clear that there is not just one scientific method. Well, we can also partly agree with that. When you do quantum mechanics, you know, there are different viewpoints of quantum mechanics. The idea that there is one privileged scientific method that must be imposed on everyone else ignores the realities of modern science and technology. He sees science as a bundle and spectrum of overlapping, mutually critical, but also mutually supporting methods that attempt to provide verifiable explanations for phenomena in the world of an empirical basis. So you see this kind of slight postmodernism coming out of what he is saying here. And all I can say, I'm a hardcore scientist, and for me, E is equal mc squared, full stop, and that formula has been tested to extremely high accuracy by physicists. What we see is pseudoscience on the rise in New Zealand, and unfortunately more and more people in the sciences are getting jobs who are doing pseudoscience. And here I like just to make you aware of Mario Bunge, an excellent article which appeared already in 1997, who wrote in praise of intolerance to charlatanism in academia, and he clearly criticizes phrases like female science or many other things in his article, and it's really worthwhile reading it. But I just show you a few of these nonsense articles which are coming out. The decolonization of mathematics. I have not the slight idea how you decolonize functional analysis in mathematics, but those people obviously can. Can our knowledge of moon phases help farm resilience? It's got millions of dollars from the government, even so we know since a very long time that moon phases have basically no effect on plants. Maori is present in all matter. I already explained that, which is absolutely nonsense. And also another one, a short scan of Maori journey to Antarctica. Basically the claim that Maoris discovered Antarctica before everyone else did. And if you look through the original paper, it also lacks clear evidence. But these are only few papers. There are tons of these papers. And in New Zealand, the merit-based academic system is clearly on the decline. And I really can recommend this paper in defense of merit in science by Anna Krylov and co-workers, which really argues that we have to go back to meritocracy in science. And that's the only way when you hire staff. But at the moment, as I said, in New Zealand, it's going out the window. It's a nice article, by the way, by Andreas, which I think appeared in Le Figaro. I can't remember anymore. So, yeah. So, further, I'm a strong critic of what is happening at the moment in New Zealand. I speak out. I have been threatened. I have been cancelled. I have also had other things because of that against me. At the moment in New Zealand, freedom of speech is clearly under threat. We published an article, The Challenge of Sustaining a World-Class University System, that came out in the Post in Wellington. And we argue that strong government and university internal policies must be developed and enforced to protect academic freedom and freedom of expression. And because it's under threat in New Zealand, there is also now a free speech union, which is really lobbying for academic freedom. The decolonization movement, I cannot, you know, when you mention Mataranga Maori and when you mention postmodernism in New Zealand, you cannot do that without the decolonization movement in New Zealand. And there is, of course, the very influential book by Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth. And he even calls for violence if necessary. And you see that colonialism is not a thinking machine nor a body endowed with reasoning faculties. It is violence in its natural state, and it will only yield when confronted with greater violence, Frantz Fanon. it's something I have clearly difficulties with that statement. But in New Zealand, we have our very own supporter for the decolonization movement, and that's Linda Tuhiwai-Smith. She wrote a book, Decolonizing Methodologies, which is very influential in New Zealand. She got major prizes for the book. And clearly what she is doing, she deconstructs the assumptions, motivations, and values that inform Western research practices through exploration, through exploring the Enlightenment and positivist traditions which Western research is viewed as a scientific objective process. So there was a criticism of Linda Tuhiwai-Smith. You can download that from the internet by late Peter Munz, who argues that she explicitly and uncritically follows Edward Said and Michel Foucault, who argued that knowledge about one culture by people of another culture is not knowledge, but an instrument of aggressive domination, colonization, and expanding imperialism. And what we are seeing at the moment in New Zealand is a strong decolonization movement in our universities. Just very short, there was the 1840 treaty, Te Tiriti o Whaitangi. Even that is discussed and debated in New Zealand. That was a treaty to protect Maori culture and to enable Maori to continue to live in New Zealand as Maori. At the same time, the treaty gave the Crown the right to govern New Zealand. It gave the Crown's sovereignty, and it represents the interest of all New Zealanders. This is of great debate. If Maoris really lost their sovereignty to the Crown or not, it's a big matter of debate at the moment. Now, probably the party which is very strong on the decolonization movement is the Party Maori, and here you have, hey colonizers, so let me get this right. You want to lead a debate about indigenous rights that you help to destroy, you dishonor Te Tiriti and promote continuing to do so. You stole our land and our language, you denounce our history, preferring to educate on anything but us, and you have done nothing to reverse this, instead preferring to ignore the problems. And it goes really on. I have to say New Zealand is a democracy, and under law everybody has the same rights. There was the He Puapua report, a very controversial report for decolonizing New Zealand. That was an official government document under the Labour Party. It basically argued for Maori participation in central and local government. There will be equality of outcome between peoples, which means that Maori authority is recognized and respected, and so the call for co-governance and co-governance at all levels, that means even at schools and universities. There will be a strong protection of the Treaty of Waitangi and United Nations recognized through human rights. Maori will be providing for Maori. New Zealand will be a nation where Maori will be thriving and prosperous, that's perfectly fine, and so on. And even Te Reo Maori, the core was that universities in 2040 that we have to teach in Te Reo Maori. It was heavily criticized. This was one book, He Puapua, Blueprint for Breaking Up New Zealand, and I'm not, because of the time, not going into detail in this one. The decolonization movement at the moment is really heating up. We see a really big rise of activism in New Zealand, and that is a speech by Raviri Waititi, co-leader of the Party Maori, and I give you the link here because I'm not playing that for you. It is, to my opinion, really hate speech. And basically what she does, she is calling for for a Maori parliament in New Zealand. This is a poem which came out that was discussed intensively in the news and in the newspapers. It's called The Savage Colonizer. It got a poetry award at the Oakham New Zealand Book Awards. And you can read through. I mean, I leave it up to you if you say this is hate speech or it's not hate speech. But these are the kind of poems which then kids read, and it's specifically when you ask that to stab a knife into the white ribs of the descendants of James Cook. To my opinion, this is inciting violence. I had a very long talk to Jonathan Rauch. He visited New Zealand. As you know, he is very much into freedom of speech. And because I'm from Germany, and freedom of speech, you have freedom of speech in Germany, but certain things you cannot do. For example, you cannot deny the Holocaust, for example, right? Otherwise, you land into prison. And you cannot incite violence in your speech. But Jonathan says no, he would not disallow that. Efforts to shut down hate speech risks harming the very people they are designed to protect. And so we are a little bit different on opinion in terms of allowing certain kind of hate speech or not. Okay, this is my last slide. What I wanted to show you is what's going on in New Zealand. It's very serious at the moment. Academics are losing their jobs, and they are all in those so-called traditional areas in the humanities and in the sciences. So here comes my summary. Modern Mataranga Maori is influenced by postmodernistic ideas and decolonization ideologies against dominant Western knowledge systems and the Enlightenment movement. Unlike science, Mataranga Maori and Te Ao Maori, which is the Maori worldview, belong to Maoris only and cannot be criticized by non-Maoris, Pakehas. Okay. Te Ao Maori is antithetical to science. It is often not evidence-based and influenced by mythology, ancestral lore, and creationism. And just to let you know, there are 5,000 indigenous knowledge systems around the world, and here we are choosing just one. The universities in New Zealand have been politicized under the previous Labour government, and I mean all universities have been politicized to the extent they are now, all of them, Te Tiriti-led, trying to introduce Tikanga Mataranga Maori in all subjects, including the sciences. We already had closures of core science subjects in New Zealand. Physics is gone at 2 universities and chemistry is at risk as well. Academics in New Zealand are too afraid of speaking out against this ideological subversion, being silenced, called racist, or even made redundant. Academic freedom of speech is under threat in New Zealand. The Free Speech Union, you can go on their website and read all about it. And finally, I would also say that at the moment, democracy in New Zealand is challenged through current calls for co-governance or even a Maori-led, only-led government. New Zealand is portrayed as being bicultural, Maoris, and the rest, the settlers, the Pakehas, beside being a multicultural society. So I hope I showed you a little bit what is going on in New Zealand. Many of my colleagues are thinking at the moment of leaving New Zealand because of this. The universities have been really politicized, and the academics are being basically told to shut up. Okay, so that's all I want to say. Thank you.
So thank you, Peter, for this very interesting talk. Just so other questions now, and let's stay to the audience. So maybe I can start. So what is happening in your department? Because you are in the department. So are there people that are really acting against you, against your opinions? What's going on with you?
Yeah, so let me just tell you, we lost 52 scientists. Basically, all the physics has been closed down. And in the humanities, we lost most of them in the traditional subjects. And I'm leading at the moment in the New Zealand Institute for Advanced Study. There are only 4 people left, 4 staff left. It has been reduced substantially, and at the moment, I'm not so sure how long we will survive. At Victoria University, there were attempts to close down the physics department. Also, they had major staff redundancies, and all these redundancies happen in certain areas. And to my opinion, not in either indigenous studies or in kind of postmodernistic studies, but they happen, for example, in areas like philosophy and so on, and the core sciences like mathematics, physics, and chemistry. And this is what I mean. What we are facing at the moment is this kind of anti-science, a real anti-science movement in New Zealand, because science education is seen as indoctrination of the indigenous people in New Zealand.
Yes, to be more precise, I would like to know, why are they closing the physics department? Is it because of government constraints on deficits and debt, or is it closing because of the anti-science?
So one has to be very careful. So there is, of course, a deficit, a long-standing deficit since 20 years for universities. But we also have a ratio of non-academic to academic staff ratio of 1.5. One of the highest number of administrators you can have at a university. We have that in New Zealand. And of course, we have heaps of administrators working in areas like in problems of teturidi or many of these kind of policies which I mentioned, and of course, don't forget DEI. We also have many staff on DEI policies. So. To my opinion, if the university wants to save money, we have to lose on the number of administrators not working really in area which I think are important for a university.
But just one, so maybe one other question. Maybe just one, maybe that I can ask. So is there, for the hiring of people in your university, what are the criteria? Is there criterion about, let's say, you have to be Maori or what are the...
No, but there's a strong push. There's a strong push for either female or Maoris, and if you apply for a job, for example, Auckland Chemistry Department recently also demanded a DEI statement.
That's,
Thank you for your talk. I would like to ask one question. It's absolutely nightmare what you tell us, and I send you courage from us because it's awful. Is there any people from the Maori people which has been educated in science who would take the defense of your science, or is it completely sort of a race war, or are there a few Maori people who don't agree with this postmodernism?
I think most Maori don't agree with that postmodernism. This is really a very radical fraction of a minority, I would even say, and specifically one party involved, which is the Party Maori. So, but I know they try to keep out of it, stay quiet, because otherwise they have difficulties with the EVs. Yeah. EV is we have 101 EVs in New Zealand, so these are the groupings, different groupings, and so yeah, so there are some people who criticize. By the way, two of the listener authors are of Maori descent.
Okay. So any other questions? No, I think so. So I'd like to thank you, Peter, for this very interesting talk. Okay, so thank you very much. And then maybe one day we will meet in person. Huh? Okay, thank you.